Hi, everyone. It's Leanne West, and I'm president of the International Children's Advisory Network. I just want to welcome you today to Ask the Experts with Anthony Chang.
And Dr. Choi, did you want to go ahead and introduce yourself for this week's Ask the Experts?
Yes, I'd love to. So good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for getting up early on a Saturday morning. I think when I was your age, I was probably still sleeping in. So I'm grateful that you guys are here. I hear even Megan from Texas got up extra hours early. So thank you. My name is Sung, Dr. Choi. I am a pediatric oncologist at the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor. And I'm here this morning to share whatever experiences you would love to hear about in my journey becoming a pediatric cancer specialist. So I further subspecialized in an area called bone marrow transplantation. So that is a procedure or therapy that's actually used for cancer treatment, but even for some cases of non-cancer conditions that basically impact or affect the blood system, and the transplant can actually replace some of those defective blood cells. And so it's a therapy that's used to treat both cancers and non-cancers, which some people may not always be aware of. And so I guess I will open it to the floor in terms of, are there specific topics that you would love to hear about this morning? I leave it up to you to ask me questions and we can go from there.
Okay, sometimes we're a little quiet in the beginning, but I see
And that's
Luna just
okay.
unmuted. So Luna, go ahead.
Hi, nice to meet you. I think your work is so super cool. I was curious, so I went through bone marrow transplant last summer, and it's a very niche field, and so I'm curious to know like what got you inclined to enter not only oncology, but to support people with like blood disorders and diseases in that realm.
Well, Luna, it's such a pleasure to have you on this morning. And it's fantastic you're here and asking this question. And so for those of you, as you in your young careers right now, I know you get up each day, you go to school, you're just learning math and English, and you don't really think much about what you may want to do in your future. I was just like that. And, I wasn't sure that I wanted to go to medicine. It was actually my brother who grew up as far as I can remember as a young child saying, I want to be a doctor. I want to be a doctor. And for me, it wasn't quite clear until actually college. And I began to realize I really enjoyed the sciences much more than English or history. And so I gravitated towards those type of classes. And it wasn't until really junior or senior year where I had an experience actually in upper North Michigan. There was something that the University of Michigan, so I went to undergrad here in Ann Arbor at the University of Michigan, and it's a place called the Biological Station. And I took some classes related more to nature, but I just loved science and formulating hypotheses and experiments. And it clicked then that I wanted to go into medicine. Just speaking with other peers, when just talking about fields and careers and majors, and it got me thinking that that's what I wanted to do. So I actually declared sort of going into medicine a little bit later than other people. Some people come freshman year saying, this is what I want to do. And so it was that experience that really helped me sort of carve my path toward medicine. I graduated, took actually a couple years off, and I was able to travel a little bit. I'm Korean, and so I got to actually, I was born there, but came at a very young age, and so I got to go there, take classes, learn Korean. Not really. I ended up hanging out with other Korean Americans and just speaking English the whole time, so I didn't really learn Korean, but went there. And then I studied for, as Uma knows, the MCATs, and eventually navigated to medical school. And even there, one of those sort of late bloomers, it wasn't quite clear what area. I was fascinated with all of the different specialties, general medicine, surgery, OBGYN. When I sort of pictured medicine, we all sort of think of surgery, right? You go to the OR, you can fix someone, you get instantaneous results. And so that's actually what I thought, oh, maybe surgery. And so in medical school, we do these clinical rotations, and you every 3 months go into each area. And pediatrics was actually my last rotation. And finally, when I got there, I felt I was home. It was just such a joy being on the wards with children, and just the hope that they provided and inspired. As a young sort of physician in training, I thought these are the individuals I would like to be around, because there's just a lot of hope, and they're very inspiring. So I declared that I wanted to go into pediatrics. And so that's the residency that I chose. So after medical school, there's residency and training. And there in residency, I really got very interested in the field of hematology oncology. It was actually one of the professors in medical school who was a hematologist, and she's a female hematologist, and she just became this role model. And so I think, as I reflect on my journey, it is mentors, it is patients, it is peers who sort of help you navigate each area. And I've been fortunate to have wonderful mentors. And so this mentor in medical schools first sort of introduced me to this topic of hematology, oncology. And then right when I got into residency, similarly, you do these different rotations in heart specialists, hormones, endocrine, that type of specialty. And I finally got to hematology oncology, and I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed the science of it. I enjoyed the patients and the families and getting to know them, because with cancer care, as you know, Luna, you really develop a special relationship and bond with your patients and families. And so I think it was a combination of just the science of the medicine, the patients, the families, and also the type of other peers that you meet that also gravitate towards those fields. And I'm sure my story or my journey is not unique. If you hear others, it's generally patients and families, mentors and peers where you gravitate toward. And I think that was that for me. So really good question. I really enjoy what I do. So after medical school, I finally left the state of Michigan, went to New York to do my residency. And then in 2002, came back. I had to think about that. 2002, came back to Michigan to do, even beyond residency, there's another thing called fellowship where you really subspecialize. And I subspecialized in hematology oncology. And so since 2002, this is what I've been doing. And even within hematology oncology, as you know, Luna, you further subspecialize into bone marrow transplantation. And so why BMT? Again, it was the science of it. I just really, the immunology of transplant was really fascinating to me. How you can take these completely donor cells and transplant and infuse and cure cancer was just mind-boggling to me. And it continues to fascinate me. And so that's why I love to be in this area.
I love that so much. Luna, that was a great question. Um, I want to,
Yeah, that was like everything you said, because often ask like a lot of my pediatricians about their journeys,
Mhm,
especially because I'm interested in pre-med. And so
mhm.
that theme of mentorship and finding the right
Yeah,
you is right there. Sorry, I cut you off, Amy. Just wanted to
no,
scream.
you're fine. I love that. And this is what we're here for. I want to jump over to the chat because I don't want to miss Abby's
yeah,
really good question.
yeah.
Abby, so you mentioned, and I think this kind of goes right in with this. You mentioned, getting to know your pediatric patients. Like you came into pediatrics and it hooked you.
Mm,
And you were
yep.
like, "Oh, I love these kids. This is great." But how do
Mhm.
you deal with the side? She wrote, "How do you continue working without letting your emotions interfere? And how do you stay emotionally stable? Because that is tricky, right?"
Abby, such a great question. And if you ask our young trainees in fellowship, I think that first year of training really, really is challenging exactly because of that. You become attached to your patients and families, and rightfully so. You don't want to, create this barrier. Part of being a physician is the empathy and the sympathy and being able to really connect with your patients. And so I'm not saying it's an easy thing. You recognize that that is there. And through that empathy, I think that helps you be a stronger physician because you're advocating for your patient and family. And it is a challenge, and you want to keep those emotions in check, but also to like I use that word motivation and inspire. I think that inspires you to want to do more. And I keep those relationships dear to my heart, and they certainly impact me. There are nights you go home, and it's you just dealt with a very difficult situation, but that helps you read more or look something up, or I mean, that's what it has been for me. And so it's recognizing that those difficult emotional sort of things exist, but really embracing it and inspiring you to help your patient more.
That is terrific. And I would agree with that. I think, because of all of you all at iCAN, this is why we do what we do. So that comes across in lots of careers. You do it
Yep.
because you enjoy the people that you're serving and the people you're
Mhm.
helping. And that's a good feeling at the end of the day. So if you all become physicians, you're going to
Mhm.
have the best empathy because you guys have been there and you've lived the life too. So
Mhm.
it's terrific. I want to turn it back over. Are there other questions? I think one of the things I heard you share is that you love plant biology and sciences. And I think we might have some people on here that also love plant biology and learning about science. Maybe you could talk a little bit about that because that piece of picking a career seems really overwhelming for a lot of kids. If they say, "Well, I love science, but I'm not quite sure what to do with it," what do you suggest? Like, what are your tips and tricks for that?
Yeah, so I enjoy the sciences because of the curiosity factor, right? And constantly asking and pondering questions of the why and the exploration part. So part of the biological stations experience was being in nature and just sort of pondering. And the other wonderful thing about medicine, there's always this concept you guys may have heard of, art and medicine, and they're actually quite intertwined. And you think, wow, science is very rigorous, hypothesis, experiments, and art is just woo. But there is taking the creativity of art and being able to use that creativity to ask questions. And it takes a creative individual to try and think of solutions. Medicine is very complex, so complex. Why do you think we have all these specialties, right? We have an expert who does diabetes. We have an expert who does cancer. We have an expert that is a surgeon, because we can't do it all. And so it really takes it takes a team, basically. And the hand does the hand thing, the arm does the arm thing, and it really takes. And so I think it's the creativity of art and bringing that, infusing that, and using creativity to solve difficult, complex questions and problems that medicine can often bring to the table. And so, yeah, I think I hope I didn't go totally off topic with your question, Amy, of how to use sort of science and it is an art. And speaking with patients, it's not always black and white, right? We learn one thing in our textbooks, we learn one thing from the laboratory, but when you're actually dealing or working with a patient and their family, it's infusing the art. And that's where you hear that phrase, the art of medicine, because there are certain things that require sort of more creativity and coming to a solution.
I think that's brilliant because as I look around this group, even in particular, I know there's such creativity here too. And also that science thinking, that logic and reasoning, but the creative idea of how can I get this idea across? So does anyone, oh, it looks like Abby just wrote something in. Since the road to becoming a doctor is a never ending journey, how do you persevere through medical school, residency, fellowship, etc., and not burn out? I mean, you guys probably tired of school already. I mean, it's fall, but hopefully you're still hanging in there strong.
Abby, that is such a great question. And, as someone who, I've been practicing medicine for now, wow, since I think of medical school, and so decades, right? And life is a journey, right? And I think what you choose in your career, you have to choose something you truly love. So those who do gravitate towards medicine, it has to be something that that you almost don't look at it as a job per se. And yes, it's part job, but it's also part hobby, and the things that not hobby in the sense that you willy-nilly, but hobby in the sense that it becomes a part of you and you really enjoy what you do. Because if you truly think of it as, oh, all of graduate high school, oh, 4 more years of this, 3 more years of residency, 3 years of fellowship, and then subspecialty after fellowship, and then wow, I'm 40 before I actually get a real job. It is overwhelming to think of it like that. And so one thing is take one day at a time, choose a career, whether it's medicine or law or business or a librarian, choose something you really enjoy doing. And I think just looking towards the future in terms of all those steps become less overwhelming. And as I share with patients, let's just take it one day at a time. And I think that's how I've taken my career. If I had known at the time when I sort of committed to, I want to go to medical school, and I thought of bone marrow transplantation and all the steps, I think I would have gotten so overwhelmed. I think the key was I just took it one thing at a time. And yes, here I am after all. If I actually do all the math, all the training, that is a super long time that I committed to the field, but is taking one step at a time. Whatever career you choose, it's taking it one step at a time, and ultimately, hopefully, you choose something you enjoy doing. Now, regarding burnout, Abby, I think that is pervasive right now. I think, with COVID, the pandemic, it's been additionally challenging, and I wouldn't lie that our workforce in medicine is certainly very exhausted. And so it's reframing what brought you to where you are, whatever your role, even mine as a mother, as a wife, outside of my career, I have to reframe. Yeah, on the days my kids are having meltdowns, like, oh, I love being a mother. I love raising these 3 kids. So I think it's that, and taking one day at a time.
Can I come in and speaking in terms of academia? So I'm currently a freshman at UW-Madison, so another Big Ten.
Oh, yay!
Yeah, I'm sure you know, like, the excitement with that. And because of my journey and people I've grown up around, I've always gravitated toward medicine, pre-med. But
Mhm,
then you hear those stories of people being like, yeah, I dropped pre-med the moment I stepped into my bio class. Like, it was just too
mhm,
much to handle. And
mhm,
this past week, this is a very specific question, but it'll spread out a bit. I'm taking Chem 103 at the moment, and so my lecture hall is like 300 kids. And I look beside me, and this girl, she not only has like her iPad and pen, super normal, she is recording the professor every single word he's saying in the lecture. And I'm like, and the lecture is 1 hour, 15 minutes. And I'm like,
mhm,
girl, I have a paper and pen right now. I don't know what. And so that is it's like the first time I ever really felt that competition in a like
mhm,
classroom environment.
mhm,
Prior to that, it's like high school, it's not as like
mhm,
crazy. And so I'm curious to know, like, how did you get past things such as imposter syndrome or
mhm.
just like that competition with your peers and knowing what's best for you in studying?
Luna, such a great question. First of all, congrats. Wisconsin Madison is awesome. I hear it's Ann Arbor with a lake. And so I know Ann Arbor, and lakes are beautiful. So, and my in-laws both went to grad school there. So I hear it's beautiful. Now, getting to your question. So that is such a great one, because I didn't realize that myself, Luna, until I went to college. And the best advice I can give is not to be intimidated. You have to do what works for you. Maybe for that individual, we don't know what background they have for which they need to record something. So just do something that works for you in terms of study habits. In medicine, you hear that term, it's cutthroat. I'm sure law school, business school, there's cutthroat people everywhere, right? But use those individuals. Again, I use this word to inspire you. Try not to get all, worked up. It's hard not to. I mean, certainly being in medical school, folks with A through Z highlighter colors, their tape recorder, their this, you're going to get that everywhere, beyond college, going into medical school, the same thing. Just try and do something that works for you, and the habits that, work for you to get past that. Now, regarding the imposter syndrome, so that's great you bring that up. I had not even heard that term until I was like a junior faculty. And so I'm glad you're aware of it. And I think, certainly for myself as a female in medicine, I know I face that all the time. I didn't even know what that word was or that phrase was. And I can tell you, even everyone probably has felt that at some point, meaning, so imposter syndrome, for those of you who may not have heard that before, is where you have graduated high school, you've gone on to college, you've done all these things, and yet you yourself do not feel that you've achieved enough or you're as good as the next individual. We all feel that. You could say, here I am as a full professor at the University of Michigan. There are times I feel, oh my gosh, I'm not good enough for this position or that or this. So that is at all stages of our career. And I think the best thing is to continue to remind yourself, I'm a high school graduate, I'm in college, getting, that you belong here. There is a reason you were selected for X, Y, or Z, and you have the chops to do it. So Luna, you're in that class as that individual. That may be their technique of what they need to do to get through that class. Just be comfortable with what works for you, and just remind yourself of that. That's what peers are for. That's what mentors are for. That's what sponsors are there for, are there for, to help you navigate that journey.
Thank you. That was a beautiful response, and it's a very good reminder as I am now preparing to study for the rest of the weekend. So thank you.
Yeah. Yep.
Um, does anyone, I don't want to like take over the questions or anything.
No, go ahead. I think that's so true. And Luna, if you ever feel like you're not good enough or you're not where you're supposed to be, this is also what iCAN's for. So we're here to remind you that you are amazing and awesome. And, I always offer up, this is a good time to kind of share this tidbit, because as you guys are going into college, we have like a whole section where we can share your abstracts and your posters and things that you're doing for college that maybe you do for one class, one professor, but took you hours and hours and hours of work. We would love to be able to put that out on either your chapter page or on our posters page and give you all the credit, so you have some place to go back and say, when I'm applying for medical school, this is work that I did, and here's a link to things that helped the community and my early learnings about X, Y, or Z. That's what we're here for. We're a resource for all of you to like be able to show off your skills and connect with people like Dr. Choi, who can, potentially one day come back and say, hey, I knew Luna. We had a coffee group session and she's fabulous. Yeah. And, this is the networking. And I noticed today we are all females on here, which is really fun too. Yeah. Because I love being able to share, to all of our iCAN youth members. But when we have a quorum like this, I mean, the power of networking together with like-minded people, living in the science industry, sometimes it helps to know someone who's kind of walking the same journey or has gone through it. So it's super cool. And I noticed Meg dropped off, but she may be back on. Her computer was changing color, so that tells me it might not have been plugged in. So we'll watch for her to come back. So feel free to ask more. This is fantastic.
Another question comes to mind. So you work at the Children's Hospital affiliated with the medical school at Michigan, if that's correct. And so I'm sure you're constantly hearing about these med students, new coming, the ones leaving. And what do you find to be, because now it's insane. I mean, sure, back in your day and not too long ago, I'm sure it was just as competitive, but more and more people have to take gap years and maybe 3 or 2. What's a niche activity or extracurricular you find in these med students that really put them at the top of your list when you're meeting them, or appointing them for a certain project?
Wow, Luna, you ask such amazing questions. And Uma is on the line also, and hopefully she can share after I speak, because she's actively applying to medical school, so we can get her input. So Luna, such a great question. And I feel for all of you, the young folks these days going into medicine. And because you're absolutely right. It seems to be where it's now almost expected that most people take gap years. So Abby, you talked about, going from college to medical school to residency. Now it's getting so competitive to get into medicines. Once you actually decide this is what I want to do, I'm so passionate, and you want to do it. So now our young folks are being asked, okay, even after you graduate, you need to get a little bit more experience, which is not necessarily a bad thing. Actually, when you think of folks in law school, business school, yeah, though their schooling is much less, but they actually, what helps them is going out into the workforce and getting some more life experiences. And so, Luna, you asked specifically, what are the specific things that we like to see in candidates? And so there's a variety of things. What most people generally do will sometimes go and get a master's degree or some additional expertise in some area. It doesn't have to be science. It could be, oh, they went and got an MBA, or, oh, they went and got some training in public health, the School of Public Health. Some other folks they come and get some experience in the hospital as a research coordinator. And so they go and they want to work in a research lab, whether it's basic science, doing laboratory wet lab experience, or they'll go and do more clinical research and get some more experience there. So I think, Luna, the important thing is do something you want to do, because I've seen individuals go and they feel like, oh, I got to go work in a basic science lab and work with mice or something. It's great. I've done it. Do it if that's what you really want to do. But during those couple years off in those gap years, do something you enjoy to do, because when you go to your interview, the interviewer will know if you're passionate about, like, wow, during those 2 years, I went and I worked in the lab. I got to work with zebrafish, and wow, listen, I got to work on this. And just as it's something that you are there and you're passionate about X or YZ question, and you sought during those 2 years to answer that question. And here are the skills I learned in doing that. So I think getting those life experiences in the workforce are a good thing. Medical schools like to hear about what additional things you did outside of textbook education to do that. And for others, it's going to another country and working to administer vaccines or something like that. I've heard some individuals do that. And it's really at the time of the interview, how well do you convey what you did and what you learned in those experiences? So it's not so much, oh, I have to choose a lab experience. Oh, I have to choose a research coordinator experience. It's really what you do during that time. And it could be totally different. Like, oh, I worked in administration doing X, Y, or Z, but I learned about this and how it could be applied to medicine. And so maybe I'll stop there. And Uma is actually actively going through it, and maybe she can talk about some of her. I don't mean to put you on the spot, only if you want to share, Uma.
No, I'm happy to share. My journey to medical school has been like full of challenges. I'm sure, like, it's very, as Sung said, it's very competitive. I graduated in 2020 from undergrad at Ohio State, and I knew I wanted to take a gap year, but the pandemic caused a lot of problems with trying to find a gap year, something to do in that year. So the hiring freeze was really difficult. And so I was trying to think of ways to kind of help the community. I had received an offer to work as an English teacher in France during that year, but that's when France was going through the worst of COVID. So then my parents and I decided it probably wouldn't be best to move out of the country during that time. And so then I thought, okay, what else could I do? So I ended up tutoring organic chemistry and biochem and some of those other subjects over Zoom. But I didn't get into medical school during that year. I'd gotten a couple of interviews, but was waitlisted every year. And I was so devastated, also had really bad imposter syndrome, seeing all my friends get in. And I kept thinking, okay, if this was what I want to do, what can I do to better my application? So I had received my bachelor's in pharmaceutical sciences, and I knew I liked that area and how it is related to medicine. So I wanted to get some more training in that field. And then I decided to apply and was eventually accepted to the Master of Science in Pharmacology program at Tulane University in New Orleans. So then I went down there and I got a lot of experience learning about different medications and drugs and how really pharmacology and medicine are so dependent on each other to enhance patient outcomes. And so I had really great experience down there, especially in New Orleans, in a city where there's so many health disparities. You get to really be with the community, and we got to work with them. I was able to create this community project of teaching other college students in my master's class how to do this art called quilling, which is just making shapes out of thin paper strips and then making cards out of them. So we were able to donate a lot of them to like orphans and foster children. So it was during that master's period that really reaffirmed my desire to go to medicine. I was so bummed out about not getting in the first year. And I thought, okay, this is what I want to do. I will like work at it nonstop. I know that I have these cool activities and experiences. And so I graduated from my master's program in May 2020. And now I work as a research coordinator in Sung's lab. And so working in this field especially has been rewarding to be able to work with both pediatric and adult patients going through bone marrow transplant. And so now I'm applying, and it's a lot, now I'm a lot more confident because I know I have the experience going forward of both the clinical aspect, but also having that experience in New Orleans of serving the community, both after Hurricane Ida, as well as donating the cards. I think if that answers your question or kind of clarifies it.
Yeah, I love that timeline and how going to pursue even further education didn't like hinder your growth and your love for medicine, but it only developed it. And how you also took on community service, because I think now like on my resume, right, I don't have too much academia, right? I'm a high school grad, but I think like community service has like helped build my resume in terms of like exposure to different kinds of people and serving. And so I like to see that pattern. It's motivating for myself. So thank you.
Yeah, and I would say for anyone who wants to apply, and if you are taking the gap years, don't look at it as a checklist of what you need to accomplish. Don't say, oh, I need research, I need this. Do things that you want to do and be passionate about. Like even now I'm an Indian classical dancer, and my teacher is in India. So now that I'm working, I'm able to take Zoom classes. And so I know that that's something that is really I'm really passionate about and I can talk about. So I think you shouldn't look at it as a checklist, but make sure that you're doing the things that you want to do so that you can talk about it and really get the other person interested in your interests as well.
That is so cool. I love that you're still keeping up with your Indian dance lessons with a Zoom instructor from India. That's amazing. What a good workaround.
Yeah, it's been really nice. And Sung has also inspired me to get back into it. I used to be a figure skater, and her daughter's a skater. So I brought my skates back, and we're in Michigan. So it's like the perfect place to do that. So
yeah, we're going to blink and the weather here is going to get cold again. So I know you'll be able to go outside and even do it on a pond if you want. That's awesome. There's 2 questions in the chat, and I want to go back. The first one is from Abby, and she said her question was, what's the work lifestyle schedule for a pediatric oncologist, and is it balanced between work and personal life, or do you have intense hours for the majority of your time?
That is such a great question. And Abby and Meg's question are both along the same lines. And, whether you're a pediatric oncologist, a dermatologist, an anesthesiologist, I think it's up to you what you're able to do, what your support system is like. Certainly, so I am a mother of 3 kids. My husband is also in medicine, and he's quite busy as well. So number one, we have a lot of help. And so what do I mean by that? I live close to my parents still, who are in their 70s and 80s, and they're still helping me. And so, I mean, it's just an extension, which I feel so fortunate of. And so Abby and Meg, time balance, wow, we're constantly talking about this with our residents and fellows, and how do we mitigate burnout and keep them excited and balance, and really it's integration. Life is about integrating. How do we integrate figure skating and dancing with work? I have to be at the hospital at 5 a.m. to start rounds. How do I get out by 3 to pick up my kid? Well, it's recognizing what your limitations are, recognizing that, acknowledging that, where you can get help. And sometimes not all of us have parents who live right near us. And so it's getting additional help that you may need to seek. But at the end of the day, it comes back to kind of like what Uma said, really doing and focusing on the things that you enjoy to do. So I am a physician scientist, so I do see patients, and Uma knows less so now, and the majority of my time is spent in research, and I found that helps me. I get to do my research, I get to see patients, but it also gives me a little bit more flexibility in my schedule to spend with my family. And so I gravitated toward an area where I get a little bit more time while my kids are still young. And so I think you eventually gravitate towards a schedule that will work for you. But I'm not going to lie, getting into medical school, as Uma heard, is hard. It's not easy. You spend a lot of hours in high school, in college, in the library. Medical school, and I think my husband would say the same thing. Those 4 years, I couldn't go sometimes to family weddings, or I had to make certain choices. I won't say sacrifices, but certain choices, and choosing this career, you'll have to make some difficult choices along the way. So I'm not trying to sugarcoat everything. It is a hard journey in that there are difficult choices you'll have to make along the way. If there's a party on a Friday night, I remember in college, a lot of my friends would be going to Michigan football games, and I would have to make the choice of, well, for me, I have that chemistry lab exam on Monday. I think tonight I have to actually choose staying in. So there are choices you have to make along the way. But hopefully, if this is something, Uma used the word passion, if this becomes a passion, then it no longer becomes like you feel like you're making a choice that's for the worse. But on that given day, you're choosing A versus B. They're both great, but you're choosing A versus B because there's only so much you can do in 24 hours. I hope that helps. It's a discussion, Abby and Meg, we constantly have in medicine, and even you've probably heard of in medical training. We used to have to work 100 hours a week. Well, that was unsafe, right? That was unsafe. And so now they limit a certain number of hour work week to make it a little bit more safe. So we have to do things that are safe. We have to do things that we enjoy doing. And there are certain things that you'll have to sort of choose to do. With studying on a Friday night, friends are out Friday night, that you may have to do a little bit more. But I would say, looking at my friends and what they're doing in other disciplines, teachers, they have really difficult schedules. I mean, think about the pandemic, teachers having to do what they had difficult things that they were doing also.
Meg, does that answer your questions? Okay, good, 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 good. All right, so we have about 10 minutes left, and I wanted to give you time to ask any wildcard questions that you have. Is there anything you want to know? Is there maybe a particular story about patient care that you want to know, or a learning that Dr. Choi had along the way that she was like, this is incredible. Whatever it is that you're thinking about, this is a perfect time for Ask the Experts.
So, Dr. Song, you mentioned you do research, and Uma, are you in the research lab with her? I feel like I'm missing part of that story.
Yeah, so Sung is my boss, and there are 4 of us as research coordinators who, and then I guess Sung, you can explain it if you would like.
Yeah, so Luna, actually I got introduced to iCAN through Uma, and Uma recently joined our research team over the summer. And she is one of our coordinators, and she's working in our lab, and I do research in the field of bone marrow transplantation. My area of interest, you may have read that Amy sent out, is in graft versus host disease, but I do a lot of work related to family caregiver support and quality of life with patient outcomes. And so that has really become an area that I get very excited about in terms of helping patients and families in their journey and in survivorship care as well.
It's wonderful. GVH like I had my time with GVH, so it's not an easy one to
Mhm.
battle, but and so I'm currently trying to find research positions. I'm in a research program here at Madison. I was wondering what you look for in, your research assistants, and how you even find them, or, just the application process.
Yeah, so Luna, most, at the University of Michigan, I'm sure very similarly to University of Wisconsin. So U of M, as undergrads, they have this undergraduate research opportunity called Europe. So many students will contact me through that. And it's there's not a limitation in the number of medical students who want research opportunities, undergraduate, and they reach out, and sometimes I apply for positions. I think Uma responded to position that I put up. What do we look for? Well, I think it's pretty easy, and I'm sure Amy can say the same thing. When you meet a young individual and their sort of passion for what they want to do, it comes across naturally. And so if you exude that, as you are here, Luna, you showed up, you woke up on a Saturday as opposed to still sleeping in to listen to that. Those are the types of things that you can tell when you meet an individual. When I met her, it was actually over Zoom, not even in person. I hired her on the spot because you could just tell from meeting through the interview. Yeah, I look at CVs, but when a student tells me this is what I want to do, it's not just I don't even really look at GPA. I don't even think Uma sent, I don't know if she sent me, I can't even remember her resume. It just, I really, for me, it's the interview, what they want to do, what they want to get out of it. If they can articulate that, it's really, those are the qualities I look for, in terms of when I look to hire an individual.
It's very inspirational. Thank you. I will, yeah, I will keep that in mind when I'm applying to my research positions.
So Meg, great question. How much do grades matter? Well, they do matter. You know, when it is a competitive field, like medicine, it is important to show that you can take the courses, that you can excel in them. And, you know, unfortunately, the standardized exam called the MCAT is still something that they look at. Maybe over time, just like, you know, I know they're saying SATs, ACTs, oh, the colleges aren't looking at, I hear they still are. In medicine, it's a little bit harder because imagine you want your physician to be competent, right? You want your physician to know certain things. Yes, I look up a lot of things. I have to consult with my colleagues. I look at things up on the internet, the resources, the textbooks. But you demonstrating competency is important. And so how much do they matter? Well, they do. A certain GPAs do matter, but this is where, okay, say your freshman year, it was a hard adjustment going from high school. We see many freshman students not perform as well as they did in high school. Well, so the other things that medical schools look at, okay, freshman year was a rough year. But what happened sophomore, junior, and senior year? What did they do to improve that? What are some extracurriculars they're doing in their life? What is that other stuff that they're doing? Community service, research opportunities. So they do matter, but it's also the progression over time that's important. And if you can show that okay, first year was a hardship, I got over it and I did X, Y, and Z. Oh, and I'm doing this community service. Oh, and I'm doing this. And so we do like to see things outside of just grades for sure. And if you had one bad year, what did you do outside of that? So I think at the end of the day, Meg, we take a look at the collective individual. Yes, MCATs are still important to demonstrate some competency. And even beyond medical school, I still have to take board exams. I'm like, oh my goodness, I haven't looked at general hematology in 10 years. I got to study that. So I still have to keep up with making sure I'm competent on certain things.
Okay, I think that's a really good answer too. You know, it's a little tricky because you're definitely more than an A, right? Sometimes the effort that you put forth might not even show up in a letter, but it's important to strive to continue to follow your path. And I think the key takeaway for this is something that Dr. Choi said a few times. If it's your passion, it's going to feel a lot easier to follow than if it's something you're kind of following because maybe somebody else wants you to go into medical school or somebody else wants you to follow a certain pathway. Try to find what your heart wants, and then it'll be a little bit easier. So, okay, so we have 3 minutes left. Any last questions? Anything you're thinking about? Did you enjoy today's session? Yeah, good.
Very much so.
Good, good.
I think visualizing the future, because like the basic chem, the bio, it's so hard to be like, wow, I'm going to use this to cure kids, like this is what it is. But to see people like you and meet other med students or people applying, it's very inspirational. Thank you.
Yeah, Luna, everything is a building block, right? Even the things we learned in kindergarten. Why did we have to do this? Why did I have to take US history? I don't use it, but you know what? Everything is a building block. And so I just, the biochem, it does become important because you're like, wow, now I understand why the calcium this and the, the pathway, the biochem, it is important in medicine. And so, but at the time it just feels, why do I have to learn this? But everything is a building block. I don't know, do we have time to address Meg's last question, Amy? Or I know we're right up on the hour.
No, that's fine. I did copy what you had said before, just to remind Meg that, she is as good as the next individual, that
Yes.
she is achieving everything that she sets her mind to, and that her own accomplishments are good enough. It's almost like a mantra. You have to get up in the morning. I think
Yeah.
this helps. Look at yourself in the mirror and say, I am good enough. I'm going to go out there today and I'm going to be the best version of myself. And there's nobody else like me. There's only one Meg in this
Yeah.
world, and you're it. So we are so lucky to have you. So you just have to remember that when you go out and see yourself and you're doing hard things, because it's certainly not easy to be, a top-notch student and do all your extracurriculars and, anything else that might come along in your path. But you are all doing such an exceptional job.
Yeah, Luna, you reminded me of going back to medical school when you talked about that individual with a tape recorder. It doesn't stop, right? When you're in your when you're sitting at the top of the auditorium, and then you have other people at the beginning, at the front row with all their highlighters. But at the end, you have to do what works for you. And for that individual, you need all those highlighters. I mean, that was me. And then my husband was at the top of the row, just kind of hanging out, skipping classes. Don't let anyone psych you out. You do what works for you. And just like Amy said, it's like a mantra. You are, you have to just tell yourself, I am here. I can do this. That person is doing what works for them, and I'm doing what works for me. And don't let the other individual psych you out. It will happen, but you just do what works for you. That's the best advice, because you're going to keep seeing that, throughout training, and you're going to be like, oh my gosh, that person's doing that. Just do what works for you.
I will write that on a Post-it and leave it. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I think that's how we should wrap up today. Everybody go back, make their Post-its. I feel like I even need to do that occasionally. Like, good enough, and put that around.
Yes.
And if you do that, take a picture and send it in, and we'll put it with the video too, because we love sharing these things. Because if you guys are feeling this, trust me, every other kid on your iCAN is feeling
absolutely.
So
absolutely.
That's the other thing we all have to remember. I wish we would just admit it and
social media. Social media probably. Amy and I didn't grow up in this intense social media culture, so I imagine you guys see it even more, right? So I feel you guys. I have children going through it, so it's even more that you guys are seeing what others are doing that could be that makes that imposter syndrome even more like in your face, right?
I agree. And just by waking up and being here today, I mean, you can set off on your weekend knowing you're on the right path. You got up, you had a great discussion, you got some empowerment, I hope, and some, good learning lessons coming through. And don't forget, we're going to do this in a month. So there'll be another topic. I will be resending new Zoom links. So if you signed up for registration, expect new ones. Just throw away the old ones, delete them, and then watch for the new ones to come. We wrap up the end of the year for December. And if you have any topics that you want to talk about for next year, get them to me, because I'm going to have all of our youth members vote on what they want to see. We do this 11 times a year, except for July when we have our summit. So you all get to decide, what do you want to talk about? And today clearly was a great success. So I'm so happy for that. And we want to keep that thought going as we go forward into next year. So thank you, Dr. Choi, for joining us.
Thank you. Have a great weekend, everyone. Thank you so much for inviting me. I really enjoyed this, and have a great weekend.
Thank you. And thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.